Well, so first off, really enjoyed American Dreamer. I think the first thing that I really loved about the film was you could have crafted it into a very feel good saccharine type of dramedy, but you didn't. You went for the more organic human feel to it. Can you just talk about that creative decision and straying away from the obvious choice to go saccharine and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, starting out with it's it's got a lot of complexity to it as a story, and he's not the nicest guy in the world. There's a lot of extremes in this story. There's a lot that he goes through, and the intention wasn't to make it like from the get go. Firstly, wasn't to make it completely realistic. It was to have fun with his character, but then not to make it, it was a very concerted effort not to make it a Hollywood ending and suddenly have this character go from this super extreme to suddenly being, oh God, everything completely works out for him and he's such a wonderful person. We didn't want to do that. So Ted's kind of idea was like in real life, when we change incrementally. And what we gave him was the possibility for change. So, he starts asking questions. He starts looking at the way that he sees how he's lived his life through the relationship with Astrid. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with it. And we look at it and you get to the end and you're like, oh, he says at the end, maybe I should see a psychiatrist, but what's that going to mean for us? That means those twins are going to go away. So I don't know. So he's asking the questions.
Right, right. The moniker is American Dreamer, but in defense, also to Phil is he raises some interesting points, even though really your salary and your savings should be commensurate to whatever house you're going to get. That said, there is housing prices are really high. It's hard to make a living here in the States. There's that 1% and they just feed off the other 99%. Do you see, I mean, even though he can be unlikable, he raises really good points on how we live as Americans here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a really poignant scene in the movie, and it gets clouded over by the drama that he's going through and all this stuff. But it's that when he's teaching the class and he does that thing with the projector, and he basically says what he thinks is going on. The rich get richer, and the little guy doesn't have a chance. That to me is like a really poignant thing that I am 100% believe. It gets colored in the comedy of that moment a bit, but there's a lot of things like that in this movie, I think, that are timely.
Yeah, this on your IMDb it says first directing debut, but it's also colored because I'm assuming you have a lifetime's worth of experience in filmmaking. What did you bring to the table, and how did your experience really help you not become really the quote unquote first time filmmaker novice?
I've been directing for 30 years. So I direct TV commercials and short films and brand films for my whole life. So for me, it's not, I mean, going on to a film set, we tell stories in 60 seconds in commercials. And that's really the same thing, just very short. So I don't feel like it's my first time. I feel like I've been doing this for 30 years and I've been on commercial sets for 30 days before. This is a 30-day shoot. I've done big commercial campaigns where we shoot for 30 days. So it's really no different for me. But I think the perception is, oh, he's never done anything before.
Okay, finding the house, the location, it's a beautiful house, and I loved how visually you actually framed the narrative. How did you guys find it? And I think that was one of the major steals of this film.
Yeah, house is a character in the movie. I love old houses. I wanted the house to be old. I wanted it to be reflective of Astrid's character. We filmed in Vancouver Island in Victoria. Partially, why we wanted to go there. We shot during COVID, and we didn't end up getting shut down actually, and it was not great. But on the island, we felt we could sequester. People are not going to be running around coming to set. We were like a small group on an island, and we felt like we would be safer in that kind of environment making it. It's not one house. So, and obviously, how movies are made, but it was
Yeah.
it was kind of great piecing it together. They got the outside of the house, the inside's another house. We built his room on a stage. And we kind of like brought it all together kind of in the end to give the feeling of that one place.
So I think we're around the same age. We grew up watching Shirley MacLaine films. You're a veteran, 30 plus years, but still, there's the young cinephile in you break out. Just, I know you have a job to do, but just working with Shirley MacLaine, she's just
Yeah.
just an icon on top of that. And then also having her play off of a Dinklage these must have been great moments for you as a filmmaker.
You know what? I mean, firstly, one of my favorite movies of all time for me is Being There. Peter Sellers, Shirley MacLaine, Hal Ashby made it. It's just one of my favorite movies. I've seen that movie 100 times. So, like, of course, I did have this, like, oh my God, and The Apartment, and going back to all her great, movies, I did have that. But meeting with her is very disarming. She's a real person. She's an icon. She's bigger than life, but she's so disarming that all goes away. So it's wonderful. So pre-shooting, I met with her. We spent hours together and, many days. And by the time we got to shoot, it was like shooting anyone else. So that kind of was put aside, which is really nice. And same with Peter. Peter's the same way.
Yeah. So right now with working with Peter, what makes him such a great lead? Because whenever I see him in a lead role, he's just one of those rare actors who really commands the frame. And me as a movie fan, I will follow him to wherever he wants to take me. So is that one of the many talents that he has? And is that a rare talent to have from your POV?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'll just say that Peter and Shirley was the same. The minute they step onto the set, that first take is like gold. There's no like working like, oh, we got to get to something. They're so there. And I think it's, he's present. They're present in the moment. And Shirley and Pete, they've actually talked in a lot of interviews about this. When they're doing scenes together, they're not like waiting for the other person to do their part. They kind of go into the scene and they forget what they're doing and they're reacting to what the other person gives them. And I think that's what sets actors of that caliber apart to other actors. They're not acting, they're reacting to whatever they're given. And the scene that they're meant to be telling will find its way into what's happening. And that's what I loved about watching the two of them. It was so spontaneous.
Look, there are comedic aspects to American Dreamer, but this is one of the movies that I think a lot of people will continue to think about this movie after watching it, because I think specifically Astrid's character, on the surface, you get to see her on an external level, but then as events pass by and it's just kind of like life. When people you love pass away, you start picking up clues to who they really were. And I think American Dreamer subtly touches on that. Am I overreaching the mark on that, or regarding Astrid's character and her world?
No, I think you're not. And I'll just say one thing about that, because my intent with both of those characters from the beginning was always it's about two people from different worlds. Pete's an outsider. Phil, the character Phil's an outsider. He's never kind of fit in, and he's never found his tribe of people. I mean, Dell, who's his friend, they're not really friends. I mean, look at the way they act. That was the point. These are two people that were like oil and vinegar. They don't mesh. They would not be friends if they were two healthy individuals, right? So Phil's an outsider, has never found his tribe. Astrid comes from this whole world that she ran. They're so different, but they find this common ground and they end up kind of fighting each other. And there's a love story in that, not traditional love story and a romance love story, but there's a true love that they found. And Phil had all these other, like these things with these other women. They didn't mean anything. This really is what meant something to him. So for me, that's also a big part of this movie. Look, we're all the same here. There's no difference between someone who comes from this place and someone who comes from somewhere else. I wish we had shot more scenes with the two of them, that we could have developed that thread a little more, because it's something I think that gets a little lost in the film.
Yeah.
And I wish that was more prevalent and just a bigger part of it.
But some of that stuff is also inherent. You know, the movie watcher like me can fill in the gaps. I think which it makes really your film very resonant amidst all the comedy. So I think it works
Yeah.
on that flip side as well. So just final question is right off the top of your head, can you name a film? You mentioned Ashby's being there, but can you name another film that is one of your favorite films of all time? And maybe you might not have seen it 100 times, but you've seen it a bunch of times as well. And what makes it special for you?
I mean, I grew up, so my dad was a director. I grew up in this world and I grew up as a kid. I grew up in South Africa and we didn't have TV. We had a projector, 16 mil projector. And that's how we grew up. So grew up watching like Louis Malle and Akira Kurosawa and was all those movies. And there's a movie that's always stuck with me. Are you a Kurosawa fan? Do
One
you
of
know?
my favorite Kurosawa. Everyone says Ikiru or Seven Samurai or Rashomon. This is a movie called Redbeard that I can continue to watch. It's an amazing 3 hour film. Yeah, so that's my favorite
I
Kurosawa.
mean, it's Ikiru for me. I just love that simple little story about that man, about that man. That's kind of I love all his movies. I mean, I've seen all of them, but his just as a filmmaker, I kind of have filmmakers that stand out for me. And the two, if I were going to mention two, well, three, I'll say Hal Ashby. I love Hal Ashby, Kurosawa, and Louis Malle. And it's because I grew up watching those films, and they've always kind of resonated with me.
Remember, 20 years back, I asked Scorsese what continued to motivate him as a filmmaker, and he said, really, the composition of images, seeing the moving images and what he can do with it behind the camera, and seeing how the image is displayed. But for you, what continues to motivate you as a director? I'm sure that's a very broad question, but you're 30
It's
years
not.
in.
I mean, it's not. And it's funny you say that about Scorsese. And, he's such an interesting mix of beautiful imagery and kind of what's behind his movies. But for me, it's kind of the kind of subtext and like, what are we doing? Like, why are we making it? What, like, and I love visuals but it is secondary to me. Excuse me. It's really the heart of sorry, I'm just turning this off real
No
quick.
worries, no worries.
It's the heart of what it is. And when it comes down to it, why is it being made? Which is why I love being there. I mean, the scene at the end that always like gets me is when he walks across just that like, I don't know. And that's what I love about Hal Ashby. And, there's always great subtext to what he's doing.
Thank you so much for your time. I really loved American Dreamer.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. It was great to chat with you.